right, so after you've done your final sketch, I'm going to turn off the eye to my thumbnail sketch underneath it, and it's just going to live there, but our focus is going to be on that final sketch layer, which should be how you want things to look at the end. Now, just like what we've practiced with the sphere paintings and with the animal coloring page exercise, we're going to go in and we are going to paint in the color to our animal. And just like with the drawing, the animal coloring page, we're going to take this top layer, right, that final sketch, and we're going to select from normal down to multiply. This will allow our lines to show through, but nothing else. And I'm going to drop the opacity down to around that 32%. We still want to see our lines, but we want them to be a little subtle. Now, just like what we've been practicing, you're going to make a layer underneath it, and you're going to call it your base color. And you're going to go in and you're going to paint the colors that you would like for your animal to be. And this is important because just like what we've done before is once we have this basic shape of your animal, we're going to go in and we're going to create a clipping mask once we make our other layers. So we're going to add a layer and we're going to call it shadow. We're going to make another layer. We're going to call it core shadow. I'm going to make another layer and we're going to call it highlight. I'm going to hold off on the reflected light for now. And that might be a layer that I add later. But I'm definitely going to at least add my shadow, core shadow, highlight, and we will use these with a clipping mask so that as we move along, we can add the shadows with the brush, right? And it will only affect what is inside our base color shape. Okay, so remember your base shape, you put in the color that you want your otter to be, and then you're going to make the highlights, core shadow, shadow layers, and use the base layer and apply a clipping mask to them. You'll also end up doing that for your background as well, potentially, if you want to work within the circle, right? I would make a clipping mask for everything inside so that my painting will be nice and neat and not worry about going outside the edges of that circle. And you'll do that with all of your space. Now, the main thing at this point that I would like to show you is adding a little bit of texture. So on my otter, I started putting in those base colors. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. And I'm not just using a regular brush. I am using a different kind of brush that has a little bit more textures to it. So over here in my brushes, I have some brush options for me. And if I use the dry media brush and the pastel, Kyle's Ultimate Pastel, I can use this to create some kind of interesting textures on the animal, because you're going to want to think about, well, what kind of fur does your animal have? And you don't want to just use a flat brush. You want to use a brush that has some textures. And then you're going to go in and you are going to layer your different colors. So I've chose a brown. I can use the eyedropper to click and select it again for my colors. And I can use these sliders to make really nice versions of it. So I want to get more of a cream. And you want to pay attention to the size of your brush. The smaller the brush, the more lines you'll see, versus if it's a little bit bigger, it will make a little bit more subtle potential markings, if that's what you're going for. Right? And you can go in a circular motion too, sort of smoothing it. Right? And I'm just making that base layer. Now, one thing I can do to stay inside the lines, I can grab this lasso tool and say I want something that's only in the foot. I can trace around the foot and now with the brush, I can add it and it's only going to go within that selection. And actually, because it's hidden from the sun, I'm going to make the color darker. So I'm going to grab the eyedropper, grab that brown, and I'm actually going to make it a richer, darker tone. And now go back in with the brush and I can add a little bit of sort of shadowing. Right? And it sort of keeps it within that space versus having to worry about being careful of my edges as well. Okay, so go through, color in your object, play around with the different brushes to give textures. And I will start with my animal. I'll go in, I'll probably even at this point add some on like my shadow layer, add some browns, right, some shadow. But using these brushes adds a little bit of that texture. So it's not so flat. And I can also go back and I can change my opacity down if I find what I've made is too dark. So play around. Remember, just like what we've been practicing, you are going to put your color, your base color, you're going to add highlight, shadows, you're going to add texture with the brush and details, and then you'll go ahead and work on your background as well. Good luck, everyone.